Welcome to our third L.A.S. Zoom meeting. These have been a bit of a boon, really, as they have for a lot of organisations, being able to do this remotely, because it's been a real shame for us that in our first year we didn't manage to get some field trips out together, because we're all desperate to get out to some dark sky somewhere. And I'm sure we'll have a really good time when eventually we do it, but you know, it could easily be spring at the earliest, and if that's if we're lucky. Yeah. But we're managing to do a few things. First thing is, if I was going to say, you've probably done it already, but possibly be best to mute yourself so when Rick's doing his presentation, so we don't get interruptions of people's doors banging and things like that. And then we can open it out to a session at the end for questions and answers and a bit of a chat. I'd like to welcome a few new people we've got. We've got Dane for the first time. He's not a virtual Dane, he's a real Dane. So eventually messaged to see you, Dane. And we've got Anthony, who's local to me in Tyldesley, I believe. I hope he can hear us. And Andy, I think Andy's over in Lincolnshire somewhere with Des Norton and possibly Russ. Unfortunately, they've not managed to join us, but maybe they will another time. So you can see everybody's names at the bottom if you want to see who's speaking. And I was just going to suggest we go to gallery view. If you're not in gallery view already, then you can see all the faces if they're there. So tonight's main feature is Rick doing basically a mosaic processing and a bit of jiggery-pokery in Astro Pixel Processor, which will be interesting for a lot of us to see, because possibly it's the most affordable of the Astro software, and possibly, you know, the power's there without all the complexity of the big programs like PixInsight. So without further ado, let's roll, Rick.
Thank you very much, Martin. Right, let me just sort this share screen. So this will be part PowerPoint, unfortunately, and part live demonstration. So let me just sort this screen out, pop you guys over there. So can you see my desktop at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you see this PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Perfect. Right. So, so thanks for tuning into this one. I hope it lives up to expectations, and thanks for the introduction and suggestion to actually speak, Martin. So I thought today I would go through the process by which I created this image here of the Cygnus Loop supernova remnant. And the reason I thought I'd talk about this specific image is because, well, for two reasons really. So the first is that it's actually a 4-panel mosaic. And the second is that it was produced using this bicolor workflow, in which in a HOO palette. I thought those two concepts together essentially make the synthesis of this image slightly unusual, and the process is quite multi-layered. So I thought by talking through how I created this image, some of you other deep sky imagers might be able to take some techniques away that you can apply to your own work. Couple of disclaimers. This is specifically how I created this image. It's definitely not the most efficient way, nor is it the most foolproof way of doing it, but it is quite a simple process. So I think it will be useful nonetheless. There's quite a lot that I was hoping to go through. So if you have any questions, I think it'd be fine actually to just unmute yourself and just shout out along the way. And similarly, you know, I'm still a relative beginner to the hobby. So if you have any comments along the way, any additional suggestions, again, feel free to unmute and just shout out. So I thought we'd go through these things. So the first part is about planning a mosaic manually. So when I say manual acquisition of a mosaic, what I mean is that it's without using an automated software, so nothing like APT, Nina, or Sequence Generator Pro. So when I say manual, I'm referring to the process of actually being outside with the hand controller, using the live view on your DSLR screen and taking test shots in order to line up the panels for the mosaic. And again, you know, I reiterate that that's not the best way of doing things, but it is a simple way. And I think for a lot of us, we're still in that early phase where we're using manual techniques to acquire images rather than, you know, automated software. I'm going to talk about stacking and calibrating subframes in Astro Pixel Processor. And the reason I'm going to go through that is because I think me and Martin both think it's a really good software. It does include an additional workflow that you can use above and beyond what you can do in Deep Sky Stacker, and this specific workflow here, this narrowband extraction, which I'll go into in a bit more detail, is specifically quite useful when you're imaging emission nebulae. I'll talk very briefly, in fact we'll do a quick live demonstration about stitching panels in Microsoft Image Composite Editor, which is very, very simple. I know that Paul has done some work with lunar mosaics in this software, and it's really simple to use. And then the last thing is, I thought this was, again, something that you could apply to any image, so not just a mosaic, but I thought I'd go through my star reduction workflow using a combination of StarNet and Photoshop. And I think all of us in the chat will probably benefit from this if you don't already use a workflow that's similar. So yeah, as I said, stop me at any time. So why make a mosaic? So the obvious thing, the thing that everyone knows really, is that people want to make a mosaic when they have a deep sky target, which is it's just too big to fit in a single field of view for the equipment that you're using. But there is a second reason, and this is probably less well known, and it is in fact to achieve extra detail in certain parts of the image that that are of particular interest. So just to illustrate this using an image, this is a pretty breathtaking image, I think you'll agree, of the Milky Way core, taken and reproduced actually with with permission from this very talented chap, Alistair Simon. And what this chap's done actually is he's taken this 52 panel mosaic, but he's taken the images, the panels that comprise the mosaic at various focal lengths. So if you see this quite intricate area of nebulosity around Cygnus, he's taken a lot of panels here at high focal lengths of 530 millimeters in order to get extra detail specifically around this area. And then the shorter focal lengths will have been used to really expand the field of view, particularly these dark areas of the sky. So it's not just about expanding your field of view, but it can be used, in more experienced terms, to increase the amount of detail that you'll get in some parts of the image. So when it comes to planning your mosaic manually, I think the planetarium software is definitely your best friend. I think most of us in the chat will be familiar with Stellarium. I'm not going to go through Stellarium specifically because I think it's outside the scope for this talk, but Stellarium is very, very good when planning things like mosaics because it allows you to input your equipment, that's your imaging camera, your telescopes, and any focal extenders or reducers, and it'll allow you to accurately estimate your field of view. And that's quite useful when you're coming to the process of planning a mosaic. So when I was planning to image the Cygnus loop, this was my provisional plan. So if you look here, it might not project very well, but this red outline box here around the deep sky is my field of view using my equipment. And I planned here to take one image on the left, which incorporated the Eastern Veil, and a second image on the right, which incorporated the Western Veil and Pickering's Triangle. And I'd read a little bit before when I was planning this mosaic, and I'd read that you need at least a 10 or 20% overlap between the panels, and I calculated that this overlap here was about 25%, so I thought I was probably going to be safe with this. I have read that I think the more the overlap between the panels, the better, because when it comes to the automated stitching of those panels, there's a bit more for that software to latch onto if you've got more common ground between each panel. This was my provisional plan, and it didn't quite work out as planned, and I'll go into why that was the case in a second. But there were a few things that I picked up along the way that were really, really useful. So the first is when you're there outside with your equipment, hand controller, camera, live view screen, you do not see this detail, of course. It's very, very dark. You see almost nothing on the live view, and you see only a little bit more on test shots. So actually, in reality, without automated plate solving software, it's very difficult to actually align and rotate your panels so that they fit exactly what you're planning to do. And there are a few things that I found that were particularly useful. So the first was that it's actually really useful to use bright stars to line things up. So just to use this right panel here as an example, This star here on the Western Veil Nebula is in fact a naked eye star. So it's a bright star called 52 CYG, and it's bright enough that it's visible on the live view of your DSLR camera. So I knew that when I was lining up this panel, I knew that I needed it to be adjacent to this long edge of the DSLR screen. The second thing that I thought was quite useful was that the angle of the veils is also quite useful as well. So I also knew that this, in addition to this bright star needing to be on that adjacent long edge, sorry, I knew that this flicky bit here of the which is Veil Nebula needed to be approximately parallel to the long edge, and I knew that if I got those two components correct, the bright star being on the edge and that flicky bit here being parallel to the long edge, I knew that that panel would be approximately lined up correctly. So I think for the bright star, you can do that in live view. For the angle of the nebulosity, specifically for this target, you will need to take test shots, 1 or 2 minutes, probably at high ISO, so that you know where you stand. And I think doing that, getting that right early on when you're acquiring each panel is particularly useful, and it stops you making a mistake. So when I planned to do this, I got my images for these 2 panels over 2 nights. I thought I had them bang on, but actually when I came to stack them, when I came to stitch them in Microsoft ICE, I found that I actually got the angle of each panel completely wrong. And although I got the Western Veil panel, fairly nice, I think this is fairly parallel to that long edge, and this star was close enough to this right edge that I was happy with. I got the Eastern Veil panel it was just angled wrong. Interestingly, despite having very minimal overlap between the panels, the software did still stitch it in a pretty seamless manner. So once I figured out that I'd got this wrong, I went back to the drawing board. I didn't want to waste this data, but I realized that I would need to take some additional panels to make the mosaic work. So I planned again, I went back to my Stellarium planetarium software, and I lined things up again. And I planned to take a third panel, which would incorporate this upper section, and a 4th panel that would include this lower section. So I imaged, it was one of those weird couple of weeks where we had 4 consecutive nights that were clear. So I managed to use the subsequent nights to capture those additional panels. Does anyone have any questions about that thus far? I hope that's clear enough. Yeah. So when it comes to the acquisition of the panels that are forming the mosaic, it's very straightforward. It's just the process that you would follow when you're doing the normal imaging session. So for each of the panels that you're planning to photograph, you need to collect your light frames, and then a whole series of your calibration frames, the darks, bias frames if you're using a DSLR, or dark flat frames if you're using a dedicated Astro camera, and then flat frames for either. I think the integration time between your panels doesn't necessarily have to be equal, but I think, just logically it would probably help, because you want the quality of each set of data, the quality of each panel to be similar. And again, for the same reason, you would want light pollution to be similar between the panels. You got a question, Dane?
Yeah, would you process it all as one complete mosaic, or would you process each one separately and then try and touch it up after?
Yeah, so I'll come on to this in a second, actually. So I cover what you do with your panels in a second. So I'll come on to that, Dane. But definitely, yeah, good question. Good question, yeah. So this is a bit. So stacking and calibrating your subframe. So there are lots of different ways that you can do this. There were 2 reasons that I used Astro Pixel Processor. The first reason is because of how the data has to be for your stitching software to stitch the panels together. So if you use Deep Sky Stacker, and I think everyone in the chat has used Deep Sky Stacker at one point or another, if you use Deep Sky Stacker, the resulting stacked and calibrated image will always come out very, very dark, okay? And that's because the data will come out in a linear fashion, and it's ready for stretching. Now, the problem with that when it comes to mosaic building is Microsoft ICE, and I have tried this actually, will very much struggle to stitch together two panels if there's very little light. You know, it makes sense. It's going to be difficult to find common ground between the panels if everything is very, very dark. And what that means is that you need to stretch the data before you stitch it together. And if you do this by stacking in Deep Sky Stacker, it forces you as a human individual to subjectively stretch that data before you stitch it. And what that means is that, you know, unless you're super accurate with how you stitch with how you stretch the data, you're not necessarily going to get a smooth blend, because if you stretch one panel more than the other, you might get a patchy blend when the mosaic builds. So I hope that makes sense. Now, Astro Pixel Processor counteracts this because it has an algorithm which is built within it, which automatically stretches the data, and it does this in quite a refined and sort of sophisticated way. So it's not just about the quality of the data itself; it actually uses certain components of the image to decide how much to stretch that data. And I think because Astro Pixel Processor takes away that subjective element of the stretch, it allows you to then blend the panels in a more systematic and what's the word, consistent manner. Yeah, so it's a systematic and consistent manner.
Could I just say, Rick, you haven't really mentioned what your camera was for this and your filter. So
yeah, sorry, I was supposed to add that to the first slide. So I apologize. I will mention that now. So the equipment that I used for this work was a Canon 800D, which is modified with a infrared filter removed, a Skywatcher EvoStar 80 ED, which is there, a Rowan belt modded HEQ5, and I used a 0.8 times field flattener, and I used a Optolong and L enhanced filter, and I'll talk about the filter in a second in a bit more detail.
Can you hear me? Sorry guys, can you hear me now?
Yeah, hiya.
Hi, I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
Why did you not use the mosaic abilities in DSS or APP?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Am I talking to Andy here?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, hi Andy. So the reason being is because I did not know at this point when I created this image that those things existed. So
right, fair enough.
Now I know that those exist. I still don't know how to use the mosaic building tool in APP. So as I said at the start, I think this was, I'm describing sort of the way that I created this image. It's definitely not the best way of doing it, but I think it is really straightforward actually. And I'm not sure how straightforward mosaics are in APP. You may know based on your question, but this was quite a straightforward way of doing it. Have you used mosaic building in APP, Andy?
No, I haven't. I only used APP for a trial for a short period, so I didn't get much chance to play with it. I've seen it in DSS, but again, I've not tried it yet. It's on my list to do.
Yeah, so I'll be interested in how that works, because I have got the panels, of course, so I'll be looking into how to do that if it stays cloudy. Okay. So in addition to the fact that APP auto stretches your image, takes away that subjectivity, it also allows an additional workflow above and beyond Deep Sky Stacker, in which you can extract narrowband signals from color images. And I'll just explain what that means in a bit more detail. So I think a lot of you will know this, but I will just go through it anyway for those who are less familiar. So we all know that one of the major challenges in astrophotography is capturing as much signal as possible. So the signal being the useful photons, the photons that represent the target that we are interested in imaging, whilst minimizing noise. And noise, as we know, comes in lots of different guises. We have noise that arises from our imaging equipment. So that can be, the camera or the optical equipment that we use, and we use calibration frames to minimize that component. But there is additional noise from environmental sources as well. So you can have natural light, which can cause noise, which, moon glow, for example, and we can have unnatural light sources like street lights or neighbors, security lights, and Martin knows what I'm talking about. that can also introduce additional noise. And one of the ways that we can counteract this environmental light noise is by introducing a filter within the imaging train. And one of the primary decision makers in which filter to use, it can depend on what target you're looking to image. So this is one of my images of Messier 45. And this is what's referred to as a broadband target. And the reason it's a broadband target is because the useful signal, the signal that we want to capture, is spread across a wide range of light wavelengths. So there's lots of visible light that we want to capture here from the stars. The reflection nebulosity, again, is visible light, so it's a broadband target. The Elephant Trunk Nebula, or many emission nebulas, in contrast, are narrowband targets. And what that means is that the useful signal, the useful light that we want to capture, is predominantly found within narrow bands of light. And we can use that as astrophotographers to our advantage to increase that signal and minimize the noise that we capture. So that was the rationale for using a narrowband filter or a dual narrowband filter for my Cygnus Loop image. So as I said to Andy just a second ago, I did use the Optolong L-enhanced filter, and this is a graphical representation of the wavelengths of light that permitted to pass by this filter. So you can see here that there is a peak that's centered around O3, but does cross with hydrogen beta, and there's a second peak around hydrogen alpha. And the bits in between are sort of blocked out. So this is sodium and mercury and other bits. Now, by using a filter like this, a relatively strict duo filter, it helps Astro Pixel Processor, or whatever your software of choice is, to extract those monochrome signals. So I can see that Bob is unmuted. Did you have a question or comment, Bob?
I think, yeah, interestingly, they just brought out a new one of these L-enhanced filters now, and apparently they removed the H beta altogether. So one guy was saying that if you expected a little bit of blue and an even balance, that's now totally gone. So there is the newer filter really lets no, not even a shred of blue in at all. Yeah. So people who buy a new one will get a slightly different color palette.
Yeah, so I think, is that the Optolong L Extreme filter?
Yeah, I thought that was the extreme version.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, when I was ready to say it was the L enhanced, and then they said they brought out a new one now, which is even more narrower,
yeah,
hell of a lot narrower.
I think it's the
I'm not entirely sure whether they're still doing this one or not.
Yeah. So what happens anyway with Astro Pixel Processor is that from your color image, the software can make a best guess of the hydrogen alpha signal and the O3 signal, for example, and it can create a false monochrome image from them, and you can use those monochrome images that have been synthesized from your color image to combine them into various palettes. So that was the technique that I chose to use for this mosaic. So I'm just going to detour now to Astro Pixel Processor. Again, I think for Andy and a couple of other people that have used this might just be going over old ground, but I think for others, I think Martin hasn't used Astro Pixel Processor very much, so this might be quite useful.
Could I just say that obviously what this technique is trying to do is to simulate taking with a mono camera with filters, 3 filters, isn't it? But it's actually extracting monotype data from a color image.
Yeah. So it's
Except
never going to.
At the moment, we're one wavelength short, aren't we?
Well, yeah, we will be, and that'll explain the palette that we chose for this, which is HOO, which only requires 2 monochrome images. So it's never going to be as clean as doing this with a monochrome camera, because at the end of the day, it's a software which is making its best guess based on the data that we have and the filter that we've used. But it does a fairly good job, I think you'll see. So when you load Astro Pixel Processor, this is the screen that you will be faced with. So the first thing that it'll ask you to do is to select your working directory. So this is the directory where your subframes are all based. So I'm just going to find my Eastern Veil. We won't do this in full detail because it takes too long. So this is where this is the main folder where my subframes for the Eastern Veil are kept. So we'll just press open on that. It will refer to the working directory up here. And then if I just point you towards this left-hand panel here, so you've got these tabs, which are labeled from 0 to 9. And the software is very, very straightforward. To be honest, I leave a lot of the settings here as defaults. So 0 is what you'll start with, and you'll work your way systematically all the way through to 9. So if you're processing just a regular color image or a broadband target with a color camera, you'll leave the algorithm as adaptive airy disk. But what we're going to do with our image, as I mentioned before, is we're going to try and extract some monochrome signals from the color image. And there are two things that we need to do. So we need to extract the hydrogen alpha and we need to extract oxygen 3. So if you start with the hydrogen alpha, you use this algorithm, HA03 extract HA. And then we move to number 1 and we load our subframes. So I will just load the light frames to show you what happens. So just make sure that you use your raw files only. Press enter. It's a color image, so click RGB and press OK. It's only one session, so we press OK there. It'll load all your subframes. And you will see the number of subframes that you loaded here on the just next to this clean icon here. I'm not sure how readable this is, but I hope it's readable. So it's 32 there. And then you do the exact same thing for your calibration frames, your flats, your darks, and your biases. Now, once all of those are loaded, you move to the next tab. From this point onwards, I leave everything as default. So you click Create Masters and Assign to Lights. If you have your volume on, once it's done with that, you'll hear this loud gong. Once you've heard the gong, you move to the next tab. This is star detection, so it's similar to the star detection threshold that you see in Deep Sky Stacker. I usually leave it at 500. Click that, wait for the gong, and you just work your way through here. I'll just show you which buttons to press so that if you do return to the video, you know what you're pressing. So it'll be start registration at this point. Everything else you'll leave the same. Wait for the gong, normalize lights, wait for the gong. And then the 6th panel, you scroll all the way to the bottom and you press integrate. And again, you wait for the gong. Now, once you have clicked integrate and APP has stacked, calibrated, and integrated your file, you will be faced with an image that appears here in this black. So I will show you what would have appeared if we went through this process properly and we use that HA03 extract HA algorithm. Let me just go back to the desktop where the bits that I've created earlier. So here we go. Oh, sorry, we'll go
if I could just say, if you weren't sure what the gong was, the gong is just a signal that a process has finished.
Sorry. So I'll just open these two. So if you'd used that algorithm that we said, the HA03 extract HA, this is what would appear once we have integrated. So this is my image. So this is a monochrome representation, or APP's best guess representation of the hydrogen alpha signal from my color image taken with the L.A.S filter. So this is the HA data. Then what we need to do is we need to save that data. So I need to keep moving you guys in the gallery left to right. I don't know if you can see me doing that, pushing you guys left to right. But you want to save this data in an unstretched format. So see, this box here is already checked as stretch. We want to uncheck that and save it. And we want to save it as a TIFF file. And it needs to be 16-bit. So we'll just save that for now. Okay, make sure it's unstretched because it allows us to combine it later on in a better way. Once you've saved the HA, then we need to do the same process again, but for the other algorithm. So we'll go back to 0. We'll change this from HA03 extract HA to extract 03. At this point, you would get a box that appears in APP where it says you need to renormalize the data. So you go straight from 0 all the way up to 5, renormalize the data, and then again to 6 and reintegrate the data. And once you've reintegrated the data with this next algorithm, you will see your 03 monochrome image, which mine looks like this. So there is a difference here. So this is the HA that's loading now, and this is the O3. Does that make sense up to now? I know that we've not gone through that in great detail, but I hope that that workflow kind of makes sense in order to get those monochrome images from your color camera.
Yeah, and if I could just say that we are recording this, so it will appear on the Facebook group, and you can revisit it in your own time and stop and start it whenever you want later on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I've gone through that quite quickly. So again, once you've got your O3 data integrated, you need to save an unstretched version of that. So you click save, and you save it again as a 16-bit TIFF file. Is the easiest way of doing this. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is go to number 9, which is tools. And there are lots of things that you can do with light pollution and background calibration. And I'm not going to go through that this time round because, again, it's beyond the scope for this session. But I will show you how to combine those monochrome images into a palette of your choosing. So as Martin has already pointed out, we've only got 2 monochrome images here. We've got one that represents HA and one that represents triple ionized oxygen. So we cannot use any of these palette combinations here that include things like sulfur or the Hubble palette. But what we can do, and what I did for my image, is I used this palette here, which is HOO. So a HOO palette is one in which the hydrogen alpha signal is assigned to the color red, and the oxygen 3 signal is assigned to both green and blue. So if we click that, and click add channel, we can then find our monochrome HA and O3 images, open those up, and use this box that appears in the middle to assign the HA image to hydrogen alpha and the O3 image to O3. Okay, press OK on that. And on the left, those 2 images will appear here. So you can mess around with these sliders. I didn't for my image, but essentially what these sliders represent, at least the top slider, which I think is the main one that we can focus on, is how much strength you're going to apply to various signals. So this is kind of a very basic version, I think, of a principle that Mark uses when he does pixel math in PixInsight. So for example, at the moment, the HA signal and the O3 signal is 1:1 in ratio. We could increase this to 2:1, and we can do various combinations in order to get the preferable balance for our image. We'll leave everything as it is, and we press calculate. So this is just the default settings. And the software will then create this color image, HOO combination from our monochrome files. And this is what it looks like. So remember, this is just stacked, calibrated, and combined into that HOO palette. So you can see that the HA signal is in red, and then we've got a faint rim of blue around the O3 signal. I'll just show you, just for curiosity, if we increase this multiplier slider to approximately 2 for O3, you will get a slightly different balance when we press recalculate. You note that you get a bit more O3 signal there. So once you have combined into the palette of your choosing, so we did HOO, you can then save a stretched version of this into the directory. It has a very long title, but we'll just save it again as a TIFF, and we'll save it as 16 bits. So that's it. So that's panel 1. So panel 1 is combined there, and that's ready then for stitching in whatever stitching software that you go. And for the other 3 panels, you'd go through the same process. So you add them all as subframes in APP, and then you use those 2 algorithms, the extract HA and the extract O3 algorithms, in order to again create this image and get your panels ready. So that's APP in a nutshell. Any questions about that? I think I've lost you guys in the gallery. Oh, here we are. Yeah. Any questions about APP?
Yeah. How much is it, Rick? How much is it about to buy?
So there is a renter's license and there is a owner's license. So I think from memory, the renter's license is £60 a year, possibly.
Yeah.
The owner's license is about 150 or 150 euros. It's approximately something like that. Martin may know.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's about 150.
Yeah. I genuinely,
which is half the price of PixInsight.
Yeah, so Mark is probably squirming there, but I genuinely think that APP is really good software. I think second to auto guiding, I think it's been the biggest difference maker to my images after starting.
I'm sure Bob would say that, well, he can do all this in Photoshop, but of course you've got to know what you're doing when you're doing it in Photoshop, and you've got to know how to separate all these channels, and it is possible. I think the nice thing about this is for people, you know, in early stage, is that it does a lot of it for you, and then you can tweak it afterwards.
Yeah, I like the look of that. Even though I can do an awful lot in Photoshop, you know, I could appreciate that greatly.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, definitely.
Rick, how long in real time did your 32 frames take to stack and prepare?
So going through those tabs from 0 to 6, I think it probably, for something about £32, I think it would probably take about half an hour max. It's definitely slower than Deep Sky Stacker, but it is quicker than what John said on Facebook.
Yeah,
something wrong there.
Those of you who haven't seen it, John put a thing about APP today asking how long does it take, because it was taking him ages, and Russ Telfer replied saying it should only take about 20 minutes.
Yeah. Mark, did you want to say something? I think you were unmuted.
No, I was just saying, you know, there's the software that you use as a software you should have. I mean, at the end of the day, if it works, and I have had a go on it, and I do think it is simple, it's intuitive. And you know, you're talking about the time it takes to process stuff. Well, I still with PixInsight are spending hours processing stuff and stacking stuff myself. So
fine. Okay, so we'll carry on for now if everyone is still up to speed and not bored. So what will happen at this? So what happened at this point was, after my 4 nights of imaging and after stacking my 4 lots of images in APP with this algorithm and that workflow that I described, I was left with these 4 panels. I'll just open up here in Photoshop so you can see them. So this is the one that we stacked and calibrated and used as the demonstration. This was panel 2, which was that Western Veil side. I had panel 3, which is this lower lens, and then I had panel 4, which kind of captured the top of the veils and the top of the Pickering triangle. So I had those ready, those 4 panels that I was ready to stitch. And although I could have done this in APP, I didn't know at the time, and instead we chose to use Microsoft ICE. So I'll open Microsoft ICE. I have put a link in the PowerPoint here, I think. Let me just scroll down. So this is a hyperlink that you can copy to download this. So it's a free software. It's really good for.
Yeah, if you could upload the PowerPoint to the Facebook files section, that would be great.
Yeah, exactly, and then you can just copy and paste it. So this is what appears in Microsoft ICE. It's super straightforward. So this is the simplest part of the whole process. So you click New Panorama from Images, you select and open your panels for your mosaic. So obviously I've got 4, you may have more or less. And they will appear here on the left. And it is genuinely as simple as importing them, simple panorama, and auto detect, and just pressing next. And the software will then decide how the images are aligned, and it will compose them together. So we'll just wait for that to work. It doesn't take very long.
That's pretty amazing if that works just like that.
It's genuinely that easy. I'm not sure how quick it took, how lunar bits, because I think that was more panels, but it did not take very long for this.
Yeah, I was expecting with the moon to have to, do two panels at a time, and then do because there were 8 panels, but it was just the same. It literally took seconds, so it really is very good.
Yeah. So this is how it appeared. So again, not perfect. It's not a perfect square. There is an issue with it, which I'll show you in a second. So on this second tab at the top, you can choose to rotate and frame your mosaic however you want. So I have seen lots of pictures of the Cygnus loop, and I wanted it to kind of be in this approximate orientation. Once you're happy with the orientation, you can click crop. Okay, and then we can crop to the area that we're interested in. So go approximately here. Pull this one at the top. We'll probably just bring that in. Okay, so can anyone spot the problem?
You're missing a bit.
Yeah, so I'm missing a very, very annoying section of sky down at the bottom left, and a very, very annoying section of sky at the top left. And Paul will be able to sympathize with me here, because I know that he had a similar problem with his lunar mosaic. I was not going to spend another night imaging this part of sky and this part of sky. So what I did instead is because it's a less important part of the image, I used this function up here, which was called autocomplete. I appreciate this makes the image not scientifically accurate, but as I said, it was a lesser of two evils for me. So if you press autocomplete, it will fill in those areas for you. And it does a pretty good job of pulling the wool over everyone's eyes.
So you could use content aware, couldn't you, in Photoshop as well?
Yeah, you can do that as well. Yeah. So this bit actually takes longer than this fabrication of truth.
I'm surprised somebody didn't spot that, Rick, and actually point it out to you.
I thought Bob would be the person that would spot that, because he knows the sky like the back of his hand. So this bit takes
Wasn't
slightly.
saying anything.
So yeah, it won't take too much longer, hopefully.
It's better than the sticking plasters Mark stuck on Paul's moon.
Yeah.
Or Tipex.
There we go. So it's not perfect. You'll see the blend at the top is not perfect, but it has done a bit of content aware filling, and then we can just recrop to our area of interest again. So I will just recrop. I'll just do this approximately, because I think it doesn't matter, as long as everyone gets the principle and how it works, we can accept that. So once we're approximately happy, we can just press next. And then this is kind of how it comes out. So bear in mind, we've not done anything apart from stack, calibrate the image, allow APP to auto stretch it. And it already looks, I think, fairly decent. And then we can just export it. So, you can see here that it's about 40.5 megapixels. Make sure that you don't export it in a JPEG format. You want it to be a TIFF. And then you press export to disk. And once you export it to disk, it'll save, and it'll be ready for then further post-processing in Photoshop. So it's pretty simple, isn't it, to be honest? There's not really that much to it. So we'll close that. Fine. Any questions about MS ICE before we move on? This has been quicker than I thought, actually. I think I speak faster than I should. Perfect. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was my star reduction workflow for this image. And I used a combination of StarNet, which is, again, a free open source software which allows automatic removal of stars from an image. And I'll explain the rationale why you would want to do that in a second. And I used Photoshop. So you can download StarNet from this website. Once you download it, it will appear as a zipped file. You can unzip it into a directory of your choice. So I've unzipped it here just into documents for now. And when you open a folder, it'll look like this. So I've got some of my images in here, so ignore those. But there are two applications that you need to pay attention to. So the first is Mono StarNet, and the second is RGB StarNet. So if you have a monochrome image, you'll use Mono StarNet, and if you have a color image, you'll use RGB StarNet. So what I did is I took my file straight from Microsoft ICE, and I dragged it into this RGB StarNet file here. So I'm just going to show you how it works. So you'll drag your image, and it has to be a 16-bit TIFF file to work, and then you'll just plop it into this RGB StarNet. You'll get this box, and then it'll run through a massive workflow. It'll have a percentage completion bar, and once it's completed, I'll just close that. It will appear here. It will overwrite if you've got one here, but it'll just be called Starless. Okay. And once you've got that, you can open all of your bits in Photoshop. So this is, I think this bit, I think will be useful for everyone, Paul, Dane, everyone who, even the planetary guys. So here we go. So the star reduction workflow. So what I did is I opened my starless image that I've just created with Starlet and StarNet, and I opened the raw image as it came out of Microsoft ICE. I'll just open those two up. We'll open those two images. Now, the challenge, again, another challenge in astrophotography. Everyone is familiar with this challenge as well. The challenge when we are post-processing this image is we need to enhance the deep sky object without causing the star field to be overburdened. So that's challenge number one. But the balance that you're trying to achieve is that you still want that star field to be as possible. So you don't want to lose stars. You just want to minimize the star field whilst keeping the star field as accurate as possible. And you can use this workflow that I picked up from Astro Backyard in order to achieve this. So we've got two images here. So we've got our starless version, and we've got the image as it came out of Microsoft ICE. The first thing that you may realize from this is that when you have the starless image, you can see how patchy the blend is actually from MS ICE. Does that appear on your guys' side? Can you see that where it's stitched together?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. And you don't need to worry too much about that because it will become less and less apparent as we go through this workflow. So the first thing to do is to process your starless image however you want. So you can ignore what the background sky looks like. You just need to focus on what the deep sky object looks like. So let's copy this layer. So I'm assuming some knowledge of Photoshop here. So the first thing that we want to do is just check that we're in 16 bits. So we're in 16 bits, and we want to do a levels adjustment. So remember your histogram here, this is again basic stuff that I think most of you will know, represents where the pixels are found in. Okay, so yeah, so we did one level adjustment of the black point, and then I was just doing just a couple of series of just very minor S-curve stretches just to increase this contrast between the nebulosity and the background sky. So if you look here, so this is kind of where I've got, so this is how we started with the starless image, and this is where we're up to. So I think this is probably about right. You can see a lot more of the filaments. It's not quite overexposed. And I remember that I just did a little bit of vibrance and saturation adjustment just on this starless image. You can go quite overboard with this because, as you'll see soon, we're going to layer on top the original image and just a star mask on top. So even though you can see this blend horribly here and some of it looks a bit overexposed, you can go overboard. So this was just a little bit of levels and saturation. So what we'll do is we will flatten that image. Computer's running a little bit slow actually, and we'll just duplicate that layer, and we'll call this layer.
That's an interesting name.
We'll call it starless. Okay. So now what we need to do is we need to go back to our original image that came out of Microsoft ICE, and we need to do two things. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a star mask, okay? And Bob will be better at creating a star mask than me, and I have a very, very rudimentary way of doing it. But essentially what I do is I select the highlights. So I use the select and mask tool and select the highlights. Now the issue, and I'll just demonstrate this for you all, is that if you select the color range on this image as it stands, select the highlights, and I'm just gonna copy this as it is, and I'm just gonna put it on top of my starless layer. So can you see that there is very, very few stars that appear in this star field when you do that? So a better option is to go back to this image, stretch it just a touch, just do a quick curve stretch where you're stretching the highlights. So we'll probably do about that much. And then at this point, then do a select and mask tool to find your highlights, because you'll get more of the stars in the star field. So we'll go select highlights. I then apply a couple of extra bits. So I'm just going to zoom into this just to demonstrate why I do certain things. So we'll just go to this. So once I've selected the highlights, which are the bright stars, I will usually expand by 2 pixels. So you'll see that it just captures a bit more of the star. And then I'll also add a feather to the image of 2 pixels. And the feather basically makes the edge of the star slightly softer, so that the blend between the star mask and the next image will be a bit softer. So once you've applied that feather, we can then press edit, copy. So this is copying all of the stars in that star mask. And then we are going to paste them on top of this image. So you see here that this time around, just by stretching the image, then using the select and mask tool, we've actually got a few more stars in that star field. But this is not good enough, because although we've got more stars in the star field, we're still missing lots of the dimmer stars. So what we need to do is we need to include those dimmer stars in this image by using this layer as well. So I'm just going to go all the way back to the original image, which was here. And what we want to do is we want to select the entire layer. So this is the entire background sky, all of the nebulosity, all of the star field. And we're going to copy that entire image and paste it here onto the other tab in Photoshop. So we'll label this, we'll call this original image, and we'll call this layer, which was just the stars, well, it's not even just the stars, it's the bright stars only. Yeah, we'll call that bright stars only, not only. Okay, and we want to put that bright stars only on the top layer, because that top layer will always remain at 100% opacity. We want the bright stars to be bright. The stars that we don't want to be bright are the ones that add less to the image. And what we can do here is, by having the layers in this order, so starless on the bottom, the one that we've processed, we've enhanced a bit, the star mask at the top, and then the original image in the middle, we can actually adjust the opacity. So that's how transparent this middle layer is, and you'll see that it works really well. So if we adjust this down to, say, well, let's go all the way down to 25%, you can see that that bottom, the process nebulosity that we had becomes more apparent. And as we increase this up, it becomes less and less apparent, but the lesser stars are still visible. So if we change this to maybe 60%, I think you'll find, you know, I think, I'm not sure if you guys agree, but I think that this is a fairly nice balance between color in the nebulosity, contrast in the nebulosity. You've got an accurate star field because we've included the original image, and then the brighter stars at the top are still visible because those bright stars, if I turn that layer on and off, are still bright. So I think you do need these three layers to have that right balance between bright stars, bright nebulosity, but still have an accurate star field. Does that logically make sense? I'm not sure if any of you guys use a similar workflow to this.
The only question, Rick, in StarNet, on Pixit Insight, you can actually create a star mask in StarNet. Can
Yeah.
you do that with the folder?
I don't think so, actually.
There's just an option. You just click on a button and.
Let's have a look. So when I unzipped the folder, this is all I have. So the only programs or applications are these two, the mono and the RGB. So I don't think that's possible, really.
It might be, because I think you might be able to pass extra parameters to the backend to the Starlight program. Thought I saw some somewhere.
Okay.
I think by default, if you just drag it on, it takes it as a default. But I think there's other parameters you can pass. If you modified the calling parameters, I think there is something. In fact, I will have a look tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd be really interested, because if I could create a star mask in StarNet, I think that would be better than this, best guess star mask that I've created. It's a very rough process. Like I said, I've only been doing this for a few months, but this is kind of how I finish that image.
Rick?
And that's about, yeah, go on.
Could you just go through each of the layers, turn them all off, then just turn each one on one at a time?
Yeah, sure. So
starting at the bottom, perhaps.
Yeah. So this is the image that we This came out of StarNet. It was a starless image. We've done a series of levels and curves to specifically enhance the nebulosity, and it's the nebulosity that's at the bottom of those layers that we want to make as vibrant as possible. As I said before, we don't really mind if it's over vibrant or over saturated, because it will be dulled down by the layers that form on top.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the top layer on next, actually. In fact, we'll put the middle layer on. So the middle layer is the original image as it came out of Microsoft ICE. Obviously, if you've not got a mosaic, it'll be the original image as it comes out of your stacking software. And we don't touch that image. And this layer, this middle layer, is the one that we adjust the opacity on, because that will allow the star field to come through, and we can control how much original star field we want to show through to create that right balance between stars and nebula. Okay, and then the top layer, the purpose of the top layer is to ensure we don't want the image to look like this, because the very bright stars, for example, the one on the Western Veil, it's just too dull. It's not that dull in real life. It's a naked eye star, and we want it to represent truth. So the top layer is a star mask, which will stay at 100% opacity, and it'll be the brightest stars. So if we click that on, you'll see that the brightest stars will then become bright, and then only the very small and big stars will be there in the background. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. So once you're happy with the overall image, we can flatten that image. That'll be your final version, and then you can just save it in whatever format that you want. And that's kind of a general, quick, overall schematic of how my original.
Could I just ask, somebody's got a radio or TV on in the background, could they just mute their mic, because this is recording this and it's difficult to hear. Thanks.
Rick, what do you mean by flattening the image?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I will just undo this. So what flattening the image? So essentially we've got layers here. So if you look at my cursor on the right, we've got the background, and then we've got our 3 layers that we used to create the image. Now, at the end, so if you save this as a JPEG, it would just appear like this. But if you saved it as a TIFF or a different format, you might not get the right result. So by flattening the image, what you're doing is you're saying that all of these layers, as they stand with this opacity, with this fill, will be flattened down, so that your end image is basically all flattened to what you see here.
So all the 4 layers are combined into one single layer.
Yeah, exactly, as they stand. But you don't want to flatten the image until you finish with it, because I might, once it's flattened, I can't then go back and adjust this middle layer. This
I tend to use merge visible, because I think you can unmerge them.
Yeah.
It looks the same on the screen, but it preserves the layers rather than combines them into a single layer.
Yeah, so I'll click that. So merge visible. Okay, yeah, it looks like it's done a similar.
But you can undo it, you see.
Yeah, I see.
So is merging down? different from flattening?
Yeah,
It must be because there are two different commands.
Yeah, well, I think merge down only merges the layer that you selected and the one below it. So if I press merge down, it would leave the starless layer visible.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. See, so
Yeah.
it's just on those two layers.
Mm-hmm.
There is a shortcut which is Control Alt Shift N and E. So if you click Control Alt Shift N and E, you can actually just reproduce everything below it. So if you see here, it's created a new layer on the top, and that new layer, if I just unselect all of these layers, is basically everything below it anyway. So you could just do that to create a new layer.
Dane, have you worked in layers at all before, Dane?
No, the only thing I've done is played about on that GIMP with the curves. I've never messed with layers.
Because GIMP has layers too.
Yeah.
The whole point of layers is it means you can selectively go back to anything you've been doing and then work on it again. Whereas if you work on a single image, it's destructive. It actually destroys what you've done before. You've only got one image and you've destroyed it. You'd have to undo everything. Whereas you could go out of sequencing layers and just change bits of it. So it gives
that's what I found out I end up doing. I overdo something, then I have to undo loads to try and
with
fix
layers,
what
you
I've been
could just
doing.
go back to the bit that was wrong rather than have to undo everything that you've done.
All right. So layers, you'd save it. You're basically saving it at a point, and you can go back to it.
Yeah. Once you've merged them, they become a single layer. But I think you can unmerge them and go back and edit the bits again. Once it's flattened, it's too late.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that I've seen there that you can't do in GIMP.
No.
The only difference between what I've done so far and what Rick has done is that I've never used the star reducing scheme, which I can see the advantage of that now.
I think there was a day on WhatsApp, Paul, where you said that you want the star field to be accurate, and I realized that it's not just enough to create a star mask of the bright stars. You need the other stars to be visible. It's just about how visible they are. That's the key, isn't it? I think.
Well, when you first started putting up starless versions, I couldn't understand it. I couldn't. I had no concept of why you would want the starless version of the picture, but I can see it now.
I agree. I think it's about making sure the stars don't dominate the main thing you're looking at, but they're still there.
Yeah.
I use just plugins and Photoshop. I've got a couple of them.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they call now, but they, just run the plugin. But does this StarNet give you more flexibility to kind of, that's probably just a one-click thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think it's a good question, Pete. So I must say I don't automatically use StarNet and this workflow for all of the images that I do. I do have this the plugin. So if you look on the right here, it's the Astronomy Tools action set.
Yeah, I've got that, and Star Arizona as well. I've got.
Yeah, so there is a command here, make stars smaller, which you can run, and that does help. I do find that it erodes the image a little bit, so your background becomes a bit messy. If I run it on this image, you'll see that it does do bits, but it just depends on what the image is. So I think for some of my other images that are non-mosaics, I have used predominantly the action sets.
I think one of the benefits of StarNet is it's a neural net processing system. So it's equivalent almost like an AI process, because I know when you're running it, again, it really saps your bandwidth when you're doing it. So I think in certain situations, you get really, really good results with StarNet, but a bit like Rick says, it doesn't work for every situation. And there's certain pictures you end up with some very strange results.
And it's free as well.
It's free, yeah.
Oh well,
Yeah.
I'll go.
The actions that Rick are using aren't free, but they're not that dear.
Yeah, no, I think this was, is it £15? Something like that, yeah. £15-20. The only thing that I haven't shown you in this workflow that I forgot to mention was my noise reduction plugin. If you want, I can very quickly show you the one that I use. I don't think any other person here uses Colormancer. No.
Well, one question, Rick. So you mentioned about things like light pollution and so forth, but how much does differences in viewing conditions affect your individual panels if you're shooting over a range of different nights?
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that, because I guess because I acquired these 4 panels on 4 consecutive nights. I think temperature conditions were similar. Obviously, they're all part of the same supernova remnant, so they're all in the same part of the sky. So I'm not sure. I imagine that it would make a major difference, though. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that APP has in its mosaicing, is that it can balance these out when they're taken over different sessions. It does some very clever stuff to try and normalize all the pictures to get them all the same before it does the mosaicing.
Yeah. Definitely interested in looking into that. I think that'll be really. Probably...
So of course the other thing is getting something like APT to actually take the mosaics for you, isn't it? To get the overlaps right. That's possible in APT? Astrophotography tool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Right. I do that in Nina as well.
Yeah.
I think the best thing about automating this is, it goes back to that. I've taken 4 panels instead of 2 here, and if I had plate solving and Nina, then it would have automatically slewed. The overlap would have been right. And does it tell you how to rotate your camera? Because you still have to rotate your imaging camera, won't you? Manually.
Yeah. So you set it up as manual rotation, and then if it plate solves, it tells you, it corrects your position, and then it replate solves, and it corrects your angle, and it basically comes up on the screen and says you need to rotate clockwise 17 degrees. So you go out there, you rotate your camera, you press OK, it takes it and goes, well, actually you've just rotated it 15 degrees, come on. And then so basically it keeps solving it until you get it within the parameters you set. So normally for me, I set it within the nearest 2 degrees, because 2 degrees is fair enough.
Yeah.
But I say, I still think what you did was really amazing. To get that degree of accuracy manually, it itself was a feat.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the hardest part of all this was getting that framing right at the beginning.
Yeah, I think particularly for this target, this star, this naked eye star is a godsend. It really helps with that panel. The eastern veil, because it's such a weird shape, it's just really difficult to align. Even when you take a test image and you look at the angle and you look at the other stars in the field, it becomes quite difficult. But it is doable. I think taking time and having the patience to make sure that you've framed up correctly before you go and do all of your imaging session is the way to do it. And I think probably I wasn't quite patient enough. I could have got away with 2 panels, or at least 3.
You had only just started though.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
What you've achieved in 3 months, something like that, 4 months is incredible.
Yeah, he tends to forget that he's actually just a beginner.
I know, yeah.
It is. It's remarkable. I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
Of course, I was sat there with a broken mount watching you do all this stuff, thinking, "Oh God, I was doing it," and so frustrating. So I'm playing catch up now.
And I think the other thing to say is, you're saying about you rushed it, but it's natural because we get so few clear nights.
Yeah.
That as soon as it's clear, you want to just go out there and image.
Yeah.
You can't wait to share. When you get something you think's half decent, you think, oh, I could get something better. It's like with us, me and Paul, with the planets.
Yeah.
And we know that if we wait till it gets a little bit higher, we'll get a better shot. But we can't wait to share it anyway, because it is just a buzz when it's clear outside. And you're out there and you've got some data, you're like, yes, get in there. I get to get on my laptop now and do something with it.
Exactly, yeah.
It's when you finish at 3 o'clock in the morning and then you think, I should go to bed, but I could just get a rough process now.
Yeah. And then you share it anyway.
The most pertinent question is when does Rick sleep?
Yeah. I've been all right in the last couple of weeks where we've had absolutely no skies whatsoever. So yeah, I think that was all I wanted to say. So thanks. You know, I appreciate you guys having the patience to sit through all of that. I know it was a lot of information. I know that it wasn't necessarily the best way of doing it, but yeah, I'm glad to share how I created that image. So
no, Rick, that was really, really good. It's been
Very
great
impressive.
to see a process go from beginning to end. It's something I've been trying to get people to do for ages, is to try and show us how you did this from beginning to end. I know you can't show us it all in real time because of the time it takes, but that's as close as we're going to get to actually watching a full demonstration. And I really appreciate that. I mean, it's just nice to see how other people work and what they do.
And the good thing is as well about us having this group is the fact that I know now, if I've got any questions, I can just say to Rick, oh, that bit you was on about with, you know, whatever. What can you explain it a bit more? And I know he will. That's what the group's here for.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was really inspiring that. I think you know, whenever we get a clear night and whether my equipment works, which is like once every 6 months, I just use Deep Sky Stacker and Photoshop, use the channels in that and plugins, you know, but I'm kind of thinking now that, you know, might drop Deep Sky Stacker sounds like some of what beginners use, and maybe I should, you know, progress a bit. So it's either Pixel site, isn't it, or Astro Pixel Processor, the two ones, isn't it, that gives you that bit more, you know, a bit more maneuverability.
Can I chuck another one into the mix? Have a look at Cyril. It's not easy to use from a front-end perspective, but you could script it all. So that all I do is copy all my files into the set Cyril running, and 10 minutes later it's all stacked and split and everything.
Yeah, the great thing about Cyril is it runs on a Mac and it will stack on a Mac, and there aren't many programs that do stack on a Mac. It has quite a lot of the PixInsight features as well.
How do you spell it? It's Cyril Smith.
No, Siril. And the one thing that's really good in it is the astrometric color calibration. So what it'll do is it'll plate solve your part of the sky, and it knows exactly what color the stars and everything should be. So then it'll set your color balance to the correct color balance for that region of the sky.
I think I saw that in Astro Pixel Processor as well. There was a separate menu and it said star calibration.
Yeah, but
star spectrum calibration.
I don't think it does via plate solving. I may be wrong because I only had APP for a short while. But if you want a free one, have a look at Cyril.
How do you spell it again? What was it?
Siril.
Right, cheers.
It runs on a PC and a Mac.
Yeah, and Linux. It's just about to go to its first actual proper release. It's still beta, so it's a little bit flaky. The UI is a bit clunky, but you can script it, and they give you a lot of scripts. So all you do is you copy files into a certain folder, run the scripts, and most of my stacks are done within 10 minutes, and that's splitting out HA and O3 as well. It's really, really quick, and then it's got some really good tools inside it for processing. So it can do background extraction, it could do gradient removals, and things like that. Then what I tend to do then is finish it off in Photoshop. But try it as a freebie. APP's got certainly some advantages over it, but Cyril is really quick, really quick.
I think I can feel our next presentation forming here.
Yeah.
I don't mind doing one if you want me to.
Seriously, would you do one, Andy?
Yeah, no problem.
That'd be great. Because it is free. It is free, and it does work on a Mac and a PC. A lot of people ask me, what stacking software do you use for a Mac? And I say I have to go to my laptop and do it on DSS on a PC. But I know Cyril does work on the Mac, and I have tried it. I just haven't investigated it deeply.
My take on PixInsight is that, you know, I think it's a top end package, but the learning curve for it is really, really steep. So I mean, I was talking to Rick about this the other day, and where I am now, I'm not sure I would buy PixInsight again. I'm going to stick with it because I've got it, but it's a completely different way of processing, and it's a very steep learning curve. And even now, I'm almost a year into using it, it still is taking me, 3 or 4 times as long to process image than other people. And there's so much you can do with it, and there are scripts that you can automate things a little bit. But it's a very powerful product, but I think it's over complicated for what most people need. So that would be my if I had to sum up Pip's insight.
There is another guy in our area who uses it called Phil Swift, who lives in Loughton, who has his own little observatory. He uses it, but
It does
I've
work on
encouraged
Mac as well.
Sorry?
It does work on Mac.
Yeah, it's a Linux-based program. That's why it works on the Mac.
Although I think there's some issue with the latest Mac processor that
Right.
quite a few of the programs are now having problems with that.
Spiral and PixInsight tend to be command line interface programs that have actually been given a bit of a front end, and that's why the front ends tend to be a bit clunky. They weren't designed like Windows programs are with nice front ends. They just put a front end on what are basically commands that are going on in the background. And that's why you see these screens full of writing appearing, which is basically the command line processing going on.
Yeah, and you can actually go in and edit that if you had the knowledge or wanted to. You can go into each process and you can actually recode it yourself if you. I mean, I don't, but you could.
Right. Well, I think that's going to say thank you very much, Rick. I think we all enjoyed that, and we can all watch it again and again and again and again when I get the video sorted. So, hopefully we'll get other people doing presentations like this, because it's great to see how other people work, and it's great to, to be able to communicate things with people who can't do it immediately themselves because they're just learning. Just going on to any other business, really. Bob's got some news of a comet he's going to tell us about this weekend.
Oh yeah, it's called Comet Atlas, and apparently it's in the constellation of Orion. Shall I share the screen? I've got a picture.
If you don't mind, yeah. Is it working for you, sharing screen?
It is at the moment, yeah.
Yeah.
Oops, hang on. There we go. That's not. There we go. Ta-da. Can you see it, the big green blob?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so there's the Horsehead Nebula.
Oh, wow.
There's M42. Here's one I took earlier. Haha. Yeah, so I haven't got the... I'm not entirely sure which way it's going, but apparently it's becoming closer to us and easier to see for northern observers. But given its position against Orion and the Horsehead, it'll be very nicely visible now. So,
what time will that be? About 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning?
I'd have to look at the details. This literally came up just before you set the meeting, so it was an email. So I could, but it's Comet Atlas 2020. So you should be able to, if you go online, it should give you the path, and then obviously.
Will this be one that we can see with naked eye, or just?
Apparently, it's brightening really quickly. It's brightening really quickly, they reckon, and it's coming close to us as well. So it said it's the next big one to look out for.
All right, cool. Yeah. So you can download that onto Stellarium. If people don't know that, you can update.
I've still not got that. I've still not got it.
I think it's moved a bit further north now. It's between the top end of the belt and Bellatrix.
Oh, that's a very fast, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh dear. When was that picture taken?
Hang on a sec. Comet Atlas passing around November the 8th. So 3 days ago.
Ooh. Could have gone.
Yeah.
Then.
Can you see that? You can see the thing there. Get the full story. Around the world, it's approaching Earth for a closer encounter this weekend. Big green comet gliding through the constellation of Orion. Very easy to find. If you go outside, you'll see. Hang on, let's see if it's got a.
Yeah, outside you see clouds.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
It's going to be.
That's the comet's coma. Yeah, it's not cloud, it's a coma. Take a picture. Sky maps. So if we go for, what's the date today? 12th. So there you go. Comet Atlas is there then. Can you, hang on, there you go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Hang on, there you go. So it's just, as you say, just by his left arm. And then if I go back again, I should get the 13th then. Hang on a sec. The 13th is heading towards Bellatrix then. Oh, that's even better. It's getting higher. It'd be nice.
Should be easy to find then.
Yeah, it should be. Well, with your setups, because they're wide angle, and then it's virtually hitting Bellatrix on the 14th. So with your setups, you shouldn't have any. I'll have to be a bit more accurate. But
do we know what sort of size it is compared to, say, the Neowise was?
Hang on, it's on.
Not much of a tail, is it, on those photos?
Draw a line through.
Yet. Give it a chance.
Oh, hang on a sec. Well, it's the size of the Orion. It's not far off. If that's the coma, there. Hang on. It's not far off the size of Orion.
Wow.
Yeah, because you can see if you sort of draw parallel lines, it's not dissimilar.
Wow.
No, it's as easily the same as the Running Man.
Yeah.
So that's quite impressive.
That's big, isn't it?
No tail though. It's all coma. It's all nucleus. So yeah, so that'd be nice.
Yeah.
So it's going to rain for the next week. You know it.
I think there's an hour free tonight, isn't there?
Has that changed?
I think we got high winds and rain here.
It's supposed to be an hour earlier in the day when I look, but
No, it's less gone.
it's gone, is it?
Well, the wind's blowing our cat flap open.
I didn't check my tea leaves.
October the 15th, it was magnitude 7.8 to 8.
That's not too bad.
Sounds like it's getting brighter.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Okay.
Last hit in 2019.
Oh, there's one of my moon mosaics. Talking of lunar mosaics.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Need a bit of-
Eratosthenes, Stages Drills, Copernicus. And the
Need
scene was
incredible.
crap.
What
Need a
did
bit
you-
of content to wear fill on that, I think.
I just clone it all. Yes, right. Yeah, that would be one hell of a contents
Yeah,
awareness.
you'll have another crater.
Yeah, well, I could just clone those and pretend that they've been duplicated. Yeah,
Yeah.
The scene wasn't that good, unfortunately. Me and Soph were out. We were going to do an all-night session till about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Then it clouded over at 1 o'clock, so that killed that.
Yeah, the
So
scene
the
looks
moon was
terrible.
still low and the scene was rubbish. So, yeah,
What software did you use for that one, Bob?
Photoshop. That's all.
Or do you just manually stitched it?
Well, up until about 3 months ago, I used to manually stitch them. And then a friend of mine called Shane Jones, who's literally only he's a bird watcher just like you, most of you, I think.
Some of them.
And he started doing it about 5 months ago. And then he said, "Oh, Photoshop does a wonderful job of merging all my panoramas." And he's doing the all through Cygnus, and he's amalgamated them all. And he just used the Photoshop panoramic view, and all his photographs were stitched using the panorama function in Photoshop. Because whenever I used it in the past, it didn't work, so I haven't used it for about 5 years. So because he said, "Oh, it seems to be working fine," I'll see if I can find my original one. Hang on.
Oh, wow.
That was stitched, and the scene was good for this one, as you can see. Yeah, so
Perhaps you could find the Apollo 11 landing site next time.
I've got those.
I want to see the lunar lander.
Yeah, it was hidden behind a rock. And there's the straight wall and the Rima Bert and the Rima Rectus. And first on Saturday, me and Soph got it sunlit. First time I've ever done it. So
just remind us how old Sophie is.
11.
Oh.
Yeah, she's had a few things published as well, so she's working well. I'll stop sharing now, and then you can go back to.
Sophie's his granddaughter, by the way.
Yeah, my granddaughter. Yeah. So I got into trouble because they saw the video when we were doing Mars, and the parents noticed the time at the bottom. Yeah, never mind. So
What time was it? 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, she went to bed fully clothed and was knackered the next morning. So she's seen some things though. She's been out there till 3 o'clock in the morning doing Comet Neowise as well. So
Lovely.
freezing her butt off on the top by the Elan Valley. So
Well, thanks for that, Bob. I think we're all looking out for that comet now, certainly on a clear.
Yeah, it looks a beautiful one, doesn't it?
One of the things that I wanted to just mention it's more obviously for local people is we all, I'm sure, I know I do, but I'm sure other people do, we get requests about telescopes and stuff like that, and what's the good one for a beginner, and Paul Richardson always looks out for those comments where they're just ridiculous questions from beginners, like, should I buy this Edge HD, whatever it was? I'm a beginner. But one of the things I'm thinking of doing when it allows next year is to have a telescope open evening where we set up in a location somewhere and invite a few people to come and have a look through. And we've got enough range of telescopes amongst us to show them a Dobsonian and a refractor and an SCT and just a camera and stuff like that. Would people be interested in that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think I can get my my cheap Aldi special National Geographic one as well, because people have said like telescopes like that can put you off, but for me it got me hooked.
Yeah.
And I think I got pretty decent images from it.
Yeah.
Considering it was only 80 quid.
Well, Dane, every time somebody asks me, and I know the journey you've been on with it, I keep on referring them to you because you can tell us what it was like having a less expensive telescope, and then you progress to this one, and then you can tell them what sort of things they can expect to get with what you've got.
Yeah. Like I say, I've got all the pictures there that I managed to get through it. That was just with my phone as well.
So I'll bring the binoculars. That's usually the best thing we say is just start off with a pair of binoculars and a book. They don't like that. They want to buy a big telescope. But I've got a little location round the corner from me that's a patch of open grass that I think we could do it in. But I think one of the problems is that we don't want too many people to turn up. And so it could be done through creating an event where you actually have to get them to get tickets. Free tickets, they don't cost anything, but they only find out about the details of where it is when they've got a ticket, and otherwise they won't know where it is. So perhaps about 20 people, I don't know, 20 people-ish, something like that.
I suppose it depends how many people are willing to bring a telescope, really, don't it, as well?
Yeah, I think most...
You don't want to queue a 20.
Yeah, we're going to be in a group of 5 to 10 people ourselves, so there's no security risk with it. It's just that some people do need mains power. That's an issue, isn't it? Or it can be an issue. But we could explain things like, what you need to take a picture of the moon, or if you want to take some of these galaxies, you need a tracking mount and show them what those are. But I think we need to pick a night where we've got a good sky in terms of a nice moon to look at, and hopefully a couple of planets, because those are the things you can show them easily. We can't, you might be able to show them Orion, and you might be able to show them Andromeda, but that's about it, really, isn't it? In a group sort of setting.
Yeah, the one thing I've realised, one or two of the conversations I've had with people recently about buying telescopes, is that 2021 is just a lousy year for planets.
Is it?
Mars is out.
Jupiter's a bit higher, at least 10 degrees higher, so at least it's a bit more out the doldrums.
But that's not really till September for kids anyway. You'd be struggling with planets in the first half of the year, really. But
but I can't see it being happening in the first half of the year anyway with what we're going through at the moment. I don't think we should do it really perhaps until certainly after the summer.
Yeah,
it's just to be thinking about scouting around for a good place to do it. And I was testing the ground whether you thought it was an idea. I'm sure Rick would love to do it because he loves showing his family all the stars and planets.
September.
I thought he was going to say his family of telescopes.
He's working on it, aren't you?
Well, Rick could do it on his own because he's got one of each, hasn't he? Including a Hubble and a Jodrell.
I've had more than one telescope each.
I don't know where this has come from when I genuinely have one Dob and one refractor and nothing else.
Everything else is hidden, isn't it?
That's what he told his girlfriend anyway, or his fiance.
I found the 8 thing is mosaic, by the way, if you're into it.
Yeah, go.
I have found the 8-image mosaic of the moon.
Go on then.
Finally, I've lost the share screen. Oh, there it is.
Well, what mount do you use?
A CGX at the moment. So,
Okay. I think,
You got one of those, Rick.
oh, hang on. What's happened there? Can you see anything?
Yeah.
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 There you go.
Great.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was 8 images stitched together in Photoshop, and it took about 2 seconds. So
It's like you're flying over it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was pleased with that because it took me a bloody long time to do. So yeah. So yeah, it does work well now. The auto merge in Photoshop is sorted all its problems out. So that's good. Have I stopped sharing now? Are you back to normal?
Yeah.
Yeah, back to normal.
That's good.
Well, Andy, I think I'm going to be mailing you or messaging you about doing a Cyril presentation for us, if that's okay.
Yeah, not a problem. I'll do that for you.
Perhaps thinking about it, I don't know, we tend to do them sort of a month apart when it allows. Maybe is that too soon?
No, it's fine. I'll do it whenever.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
If we try and arrange a date, you know, about a month from now.
Yeah, it's fine by me.
Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up or say?
No, I think that's
Hope you've all got your Batiknoff masks ready for going out there. I was thinking of actually trying to get us some printed.
Yeah, that'd be very cool.
It would be brilliant.
Yeah.
Like a bloody gas mask.
L.A.S. wrote on it as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, you see, in the second year, we're looking to get a logo with on a T-shirt. Maybe Rick could design it, you know, in our L.A.S, not in our Cosmos. Where did you get that design from? Did you make that all yourself completely, or did you borrow it from somewhere?
It was part me and part borrowed. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Okay, shall we call it a day then?
Yeah.
Right.
Nice to see you all.
Thanks for
cheers,
coming.
Rick.
Really good. Hope we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.